for New Year. I think I'm looking for after a long time break on our New Year, right? Hope everyone is keeping well, doing good. Okay, so what we will do? So I was thinking to just quickly revise the chapter 6 till chapter 6 what we have discussed, so that we can be on the same pace and 2 weeks, 3 weeks we are off. So let's just revise once again. Okay. So we'll chant the prayers and then I'll share my screen and we can revive it quickly. The whole 6 chapters, the summary of whole 6 chapters. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. So welcome you all once again and wish you all Happy New Year as well. So let me know if you can see my screen. I'm just sharing. Can you see it, please? Anyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So the first section we have discussed, I think from last more than 6 months, 7 months, we have discussing chapter 1 to chapter 6. And this is the first section we have completed in last year anyway, before ending our for vacation for 2 weeks break. And that first section is chapter 1 to chapter 6, where precisely it's more of karma yoga, where Krishna talks about more describing Arjuna to perform his duties, perform his prescribed duties, and rather than maybe precisely his to fight the war rather than giving up the war. So in chapter 1, entitled Observing the Armies on the Battlefield of Kurukshetra, where we have seen how Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya to narrate what's happening in there, and he was actually uncertain that what's going to happen because they're dharma kshetra, and he know very well that my sons are not dharmic, and he was a bit confused. So and then at the end of the chapter we see is how Arjuna, by seeing all his kinsmen standing before him to fight, he decided not to fight the war, and he says, okay Krishna, and he says, my hands are trembling, my mouths are drying up, and he gave up his bow as well. And he gave 4 reasons precisely in the chapter. He says he was compassion towards his let me zoom a bit more so that you can see it. Is it clear for is it now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. So Arjuna says he was very compassion towards his kinsmen, seeing his brother, his father, his teacher, and sons, everyone over there, and he says, oh my goodness, I'm going to fight with this thing, people, it's not good. And he says, Krishna, because of compassion to all the peoples, he said, I'm not going to fight the war. And then after that he says that even if I fight, even if I win, there is no enjoyment, because all my kinsmen will be killed. So there is no enjoyment, and when we get something, we should enjoy with our kinsmen, but there is no one to enjoy, so it's not good as well. And then he gives another reason. He says, oh Krishna, if I fight, actually I will go into hellish planet, because I will do sin. I will acquiring so much sinful reactions by killing all these people in the war. And then he talks about family destruction. He says, if their elders will be killed, then there will no good one to take care of these ladies, and the destruction will happen, right? And that was whole in chapter 1 very precisely. And then in chapter 2, this is contents of the Gita summarized. In chapter 2, actually, we see all the summary, essence of Bhagavad Gita, and then it's called Gita summarized. In chapter 2, in the very start, Arjuna gives the fifth reason. There's indecision. He was quite bewildered. He says, no, I'm actually not able to understand what to do, what not to do. And oh Krishna, please suggest me. And so he surrenders to Krishna. He says, oh Krishna, I'm accepting you as my guru, and I'm a surrendered soul to you. Please describe me, or please suggest me which is best for me, is best for me. And that's also comes learning for us to approach a bona fide guru to guide us in our path when we are bewildered, right? And then Krishna guides Arjuna by giving so many knowledge. He says, he talks about jnana. What are the basic things? He talks about knowledge, because Arjuna was actually lamenting for his kinsmen because they will be killed. And Krishna says about the knowledge of soul and body. Actually, we are not this body. We are actually spiritual spark. We are soul. And even by killing this body, the soul remains eternally. And all this philosophy Krishna talks about to Arjuna, all the knowledge of body and soul. So Arjuna was seeing the body, but Krishna was talking about the soul. Even the body is being slain, the soul remains there. And also Krishna says the soul was existing in the past. It existing right away, you can see. And even if after giving this body, it will exist as well. And Krishna gave more examples, like, as we give up our torn clothes, so is the soul gives up this body when the time comes and takes another body. There was a jnana, there was knowledge of soul and body. And then Krishna talks about performing activities and do sakam karma yoga and perform your prescribed duty and attain enjoyment. He talks about two things. He says, even if you by performing your duty, means your duty is now to perform this, fight the war. Even if you win, actually you will enjoy the kingdom. And if you die, because you are a Kshatriya, you are dying in a battlefield, will actually elevate to heavenly kingdom and you enjoy there. So in both ways, win-win situation. So you should perform your prescribed duty. And then he talks more higher. He talks about niskam karma yoga. So you should work without or with detachment and knowledge, right? He talks about so many things that you should be equipoised. And when Arjuna heard these things, he asks about this Tita Pragya, and Krishna describes about this Tita Pragya, right? Now, be equipoised in happiness and sorrow and honor and dishonor, all the qualities being described in chapter 2. So that's a quick summary of chapter 2, where Krishna imparts very, very important knowledge, that is a jnana, knowledge of this body. Who am I? I am not this body. This body is made by Pancha Mahabhut, but the real spark, the spiritual spark is there, and that's the soul. So there is a two things lying, its body and the soul. And Krishna discriminates both, and it will find that who in what. And then going ahead, in chapter 3, Arjuna asks a question. He says, oh Krishna, shall I renounce or shall I perform work? Which is better than this? Because actually, if you see, intention of Arjuna was to somehow or other go away from the fight. So he's asking the question again. Sannyasa, shall I renounce this work, wherever I am, or perform activity, perform my work? And Krishna says that performing prescribed action with detachment is better than premature renunciation. So Krishna again clears Arjuna that you should perform your duty, you should perform your activity where you are prescribed, because you're Kshatriya and you are supposed to fight the war. And anyway, you are in the middle of the battlefield, so you should not go away by giving up your these activities. And Krishna talks about when we do something, when we renounce something prematurely, we actually make havoc in the society. So coming into a higher stage and renouncing things is another thing, but premature renunciation is not as advisable, that Krishna suggested there. And Krishna gave a very, very beautiful example to Arjuna that even if you are qualified for renunciation, perform your work to set example. Because you are a very, very well-known, very great Kshatriya, and if you go away from the battlefield, people will talk infamy about you. So you should perform activity. And he gave example of Janaka Maharaj, and about himself as well. He says, I am not obliged to perform any activity, but I'm working, I'm performing. Even Janak Maharaj, he was quite, on a very elevated soul, but still he was actually taking care of the kingdom very well, right? So you should perform your prescribed duty. And then at the end of chapter 3, Krishna talks about lust, that lust is a formidable enemy on the path of yoga, and how to conquer it. So conquering it is conquering our senses, conquering our mind, conquering our intelligence. We saw this chariot diagram, right, where this mind should control the senses, not senses should control the mind, and the mind should be controlled by intelligence. In that way, the soul, which is the passenger in the chariot, can actually lead to the perfect path, right? And then Krishna talks more about in chapter 4 transcendental knowledge, what that knowledge, and Krishna says is actually we can conquer this by this transcendental knowledge. We can actually protect from the bondage of lust. What happens? The lust, because of desire, we are actually entangled with this janma mrita vijayasyaji, the cycle of birth and death, and hence to go away from here we need transcendental knowledge. And Krishna talks about this knowledge very well, that this knowledge is actually comes in parampara, and somehow that it has lost, so I'm re-establishing it through Arjuna, right? And we have seen how when Krishna says that I have given this knowledge to Vivaswan, and then how this knowledge came, but in due course of time it actually lost. So Arjuna asks a question, Krishna, you are of same age, then how have you given this knowledge to Vivaswan? Then Krishna says that yes, there is more detail on that we have discussed, right? How Krishna says that the body which I am is Sachidananda, and you forget everything in next body, but I do not forget everything. It's my same body, right? And then we discussed a very important topic about work, that is, what is this knowledge, what is karma, what is akarma, and what is bikarma. So karma is to activity, akarma is activity against our prescribed duties, and bikarma is against a prescribed duty, and akarma is performing a duty without acquiring any result, reactions to that. So Krishna says that perform your duty with knowledge, acquire knowledge and perform your duty, so that you won't acquire any reaction to that. And then Krishna says that this knowledge is very, very difficult to understand. However, we should approach a bona fide teacher, bona fide spiritual master, tad vidhi paripatena pariprasthana sevaya. So inquire from him submissively, and he will able to teach you this perfect transcendental knowledge. That's basically learning to us. And then at the end of chapter 4, Krishna says that cut down all the doubts with the sword of knowledge. So this knowledge which you acquire from a bona fide teacher will help you to clear all your doubts, and hence cut down all this knowledge. And at the end, Krishna says again, oh Arjuna, get up and fight. With that knowledge, get up and fight, perform your duty, prescribed duty, right? And then Arjuna again asks the same question, oh Krishna, what about renunciation or action? What shall I perform? And then the chapter 5 comes, he says, Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. And Lord even says that renunciation is also an action. Karma Yoga is actually, both are equal. However, Karma Yoga is easier because it's sublime and it's practical as well. And as we discussed earlier in chapter 3, premature renunciation is not advisable. So then Krishna says that by performing this karma yoga, one can be free from the bondage. And at end of the chapter 5, Krishna talks about Ashtanga Yoga in 2 verses. And very briefly, he says about even by performing Ashtanga Yoga, actually we can take the path of liberation. And at the end, the peace formula comes up. That's Bhoktaram Yagatapasham Charvalokamaishwaram. So understanding how can we be peace? By understanding that Krishna is all proprietor, Krishna is all controller, Krishna is the beneficiary of all sacrifices. By understanding this knowledge, we can be very peaceful. So by performing in this way, by performing our activities as a sacrifice to Vishnu, we can be peaceful. Just a second. Let me put my charger. And the last chapter we discussed is chapter 6, that's Dhyana Yoga. So in chapter 5, Krishna has spoken very briefly in Ashtanga Yoga. But in chapter 6, Krishna explains in details about Ashtanga Yoga, what are the different processes, what are the different levels of beginning stages and advanced stages, what happens when the person is advanced, how he sees everything, how he sees the stones, this gold, and all as equal. And at the end, the perfection is to realize the super soul. So these yogis, when they on the platform of samadhi, by performing all this yamana, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, at that stage, they actually focus on this Vishnu form as a super soul within them, and they control their mind. And Krishna talks about very important thing, that controlling the mind, where Arjuna says that, oh Krishna, this controlling mind looks to be very, very difficult. It's like, it might be easier to control the winds, but it's not easy to control the mind. And we know practically that wind cannot be controlled, right? So that's how this mind also cannot be controlled. And Arjuna says, oh Krishna, please give me some other process, or how can we go on these things. And also Arjuna asks another question saying that, okay, what happens if someone is unsuccessful in this practice? And Krishna says that unsuccessful, it's actually, there is no unsuccessful in the practice of this yoga system. Even if you are practice a little bit, then you can get a good birth in a good family. And if you practice for a long time, you'll get a birth in a Brahmana or Vaishnava family, so that you can continue your yoga process ahead. And at the end, by hearing the question from Arjuna about this difficulty in practicing this Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga is not practical in this yoga, Krishna says in the last verse of chapter 6, that bhakti is the best yoga process. Yoginam api sarvesam mad gatanantar atmanam sardhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamamatah. So Krishna says that Yoginam api sarvesam sardhavan bhajate yoma, right? The one who worship me with devotion and who abides in me, who thinks of me, they're the best process. And by concluding that last verse, Krishna continues to elaborate it in next 6 chapters, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Right. So here Krishna is going to elaborately describe about this bhakti yoga. Right. So hope this makes a good background for continuing our chapter 7. Anyone have any thought before we continue? I know we have taken some more time to discuss this, revise this chapter 6, till chapter 6. So just to be on the track so that we don't get lost. All right. So let's see what chapter 7 is. So from chapter 7 we'll go verse by verse. Yeah. So chapter 7 is knowledge of the absolute. I would like to read one thing. Actually, that's already there in Prabhupada's purport. So chapter 7 till chapter 12, it's again another section. That's a part 2, or section 2, we can say, is Bhakti Yoga. So first section, chapter 1 to chapter 6, was precisely on Karma Yoga. And second section, chapter 7 till chapter 12, is more of devotion, more of Bhakti. So first section is also called as, Karma in action or Karma Yoga. And second part is, Bhakti in action or devotion in action. Because Krishna is going to elaborate here more things about himself, about his energies, about we living entities, and much, much more things. Right? How can we become devoted to Krishna? So chapter 7, the knowledge of the absolute. So absolute is Krishna, and about his knowledge, we'll say. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manaha Partha Yogam Yunjum Madashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatha Gyasha Shitakshunu. Says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, now hear, O son of Pratha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. If you remember, in previous verse, last verse of chapter 6, Krishna says that abides in me, think of me, worship me. So that needs to be elaborated. Now Krishna is saying that now hear from me. So here Krishna is an authority. Here Krishna is Swam Bhagavan. Krishna is speaking. That's authority completely. So he is saying that just hear from me. How? By practicing yoga in full consciousness of me. So when you hear from Krishna about how practicing this full consciousness of me, understanding who Krishna is, and with mind attached to me, Krishna says in previous verse that you should remember me. So how? By practicing this connection. Yoga means what? Connecting with the Supreme. So how your mind can be attached to me, you can know me in full, and you will be free from all doubts. So by attaching ourselves to Krishna, by practicing this yoga of bhakti yoga in full consciousness of Krishna, attaching our mind to Krishna, we can actually know him in full. Anyway, understanding Krishna in full is not possible for anyone. However, at least we can know much more thing about Krishna. Right? When we are actually try to associate with Krishna, it's like Krishna is Bhagwan himself. So when we associate with him, Krishna, we know more about him. And the way to associate with Krishna is Krishna speaking here only itself. He says what? Takshunu, here. So here, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, here Srimad Bhagavatam, it's text tells more about Krishna himself. So when we hear about him more and more, we can actually know him more. And Prabhupada nicely says here that in this 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna consciousness is fully described. Krishna is full in all opulences, and how he manifests such opulences is described here. So all this Krishna's energy will be described in this chapter. And also it describes the 4 kind of people who surrender to Krishna, 4 kind of people who accept Krishna, and 4 kind of people who do not take or shelter to Krishna. That also been described in this chapter, right? And in this next second section, Prabhupada explains about this previous chapter 6 and how Krishna completely says about bhakti yoga is the best one. That's the words of Krishna, that yogina sarvesam mad gatinantaratmana, who abides in me, who thinks of me. And then Shraddhavan bhajate yaman. Shraddhavan, its faith is required. Shraddhavan bhajate yaman, who worship me with devotion. And that is one Same Yukta Tamamataha. That is the topmost yogi. Right. That's the conclusion of chapter 6 as well. So Krishna is saying here, Maya Sakta Manapartha. So engage your mind in me, attach your mind to me. Maya means me. Directly Krishna is saying it's to attach your mind onto me. And Yogam Inju means perform your activity by Mad Ashraya, taking shelter in me. So practice your yoga, practice your duty in consciousness of me, Mad Ashraya, or taking shelter of me. And then your all doubt will be cleared and you will be free from all doubts. Right. So very nicely has been described that to understand the science of Krishna, we have to hear from Krishna himself or from his representative. Right. So Prabhupada quotes a very nice 5 verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, that how by hearing from Krishna or from his bona fide devotees, how we can actually understand Krishna. So he says, one should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of chapter 6, and concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in the 9 different forms, and of which Savanam is the first and foremost. We have discussed about the 9 limbs, right? Savanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So from there, the Savanam hearing is the topmost one. Hearing is both Savanam and Kirtanam is actually topmost one. And now Prabhupada says that the Lord therefore says that Takshunu, hear from me. No one can be greater authority than Krishna, isn't it? Krishna is Swam Bhagwan, Param Bhagwan. So there is no more greater authority than him. He is saying to do it. And therefore, By hearing from him, one receives the greatest opportunity to become perfectly consciousness person. See, the point is, we may ask, right now, if we don't have Krishna in front of us, how can we hear it? So Arjuna was fortunate enough that Krishna was with him and Krishna was speaking to Arjuna. So Krishna spoke to Arjuna and Arjuna understood it. But what about us? We can't see Krishna, isn't it? Practically, maybe by our eyes we cannot see it, but actually through our ears we can actually see Krishna. How? Takshuna, by hearing from his devotees, by hearing Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has personally given this Bhagavad Gita for us. And by reading this Bhagavad Gita, there are words of Krishna, we can actually understand him. Srimad Bhagavatam is being narration about the Krishna by his great devotees. So by hearing Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, actually we can understand Krishna as well. And hence Prabhupada says, one has therefore to learn Krishna directly or from a pure devotee of Krishna, because the pure devotee of Krishna are representative of Krishna himself. Right? Guru is representative of Krishna. So when we hear this knowledge from the Guru, we can actually understand it. And very clearly Prabhupada says, understand is from Krishna or from pure devotee of Krishna and not from a non-devotee. So it's not about academic education. Okay, I know Sanskrit verses, I can recite the verses, I can speak. It's not about that. It's more about the devotion. If you remember the previous word, Krishna says, Shraddhavan, the faith should be there, the devotion should be there to worship Krishna. It's not about, I know I can read Sanskrit very well, I can recite Sanskrit verses very well, then I'm puffed up with my knowledge. It's not that. From them, we won't be able to understand Krishna. But just by devotion or hearing with pure devotion, we can understand it. And Prabhupada mentions very nicely 4 or 5 verses what happens or the process of understanding Krishna. It says, Shrunatam Savata Krishnam, Shrunatam Swakatha Krishnam, Purnya Saranam Kirtana, Hridayanta Histo Hevadrani, Vidunoti Sutam Sadam, Nashta Preshu Vadeshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavate Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati, Naishtiki, and these other verses. So, would someone please read this translation? This is very important, that as how to understand Krishna, and how can we understand science of Krishna. This is from Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, 17 to 21. So read it, please.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself, I cannot see that, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samagram, understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Krishna.
Thank you very much. So if you remember, we were discussing earlier, why it's important to understand things from a parampara. And Krishna himself, he says in previously chapter that, okay, idam paramparam prapti, right? So this should be understood by parampara as well. And Krishna says, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasthena sevaya. So approach a bona fide spiritual master and do service to him, inquire submissively him. So Krishna has already spoken these things. Again, it being spoken here again. The point is, see, I'll give the same example again. So you may find medical books like how to do operation in a library, and you may go and then find the book and read it, how to do operation, how to do heart surgery, right? But do we think that anyone we can go and do surgery just by reading the books? That's not possible. We have to go through a bona fide institute, we have to go through a bona fide college and take our degree, PhD degree, MBBS degree, and all the things. Then only we are able to make a surgery. Then we can say, okay, this XYZ has done MBBS from this university or this college, so he is now an authorized doctor, and now he actually can perform this surgery or activities, right? Just by getting this bookish knowledge, it's not possible. So this Bhagavad Gita, though it's not material book, it's transcendental book anyway, but it's available across everywhere. It's available across all libraries. We can get it in our phone, in our internet, everything. But to understand the real realm of this book, we need to approach a bona fide spiritual master. We need to approach associate of who are directly associating with Krishna, right? And then there's the process by which we can understand this. So that's what Prabhupada makes emphasis, understanding this knowledge by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness, right? So that's a very, very important message Krishna gives in this chapter. And Krishna said, hear from me, and by which, how to hearing that Maya Shakta, by attaching your mind onto me, Mad Ashraya, taking shelter of me, and perform your yoga injum. And that's the first verse. It says, Maya means me, Asakta. So attach our mind onto Krishna, and then Mad Ashraya, take his shelter, and then perform your activity. In that way, all our doubts will be cleared, right? And let's see text 2. Text 2 is again, Krishna is going to say that what knowledge he is going to give now. So now he says, hear from me, and now Krishna is going to very briefly describe what he's going to explain in next few chapters. Jnanam teyam sa vijnanam idam vakshami asheshatah yas gyatva neho bhuyo anyaj gyatva vyam avishashate. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. So Krishna, he's saying that I will give you this knowledge. What knowledge? Both phenomenal and numinous. And by understanding this knowledge, there nothing will remain for you to know. So this is the complete knowledge, the science and self-realization. Right. So one is just theoretical knowledge, and one is practical knowledge. And when it comes phenomenal knowledge, this knowledge means Krishna is going to give knowledge about his energies, right? And numinous means this about himself. So right? So how his connection happens with Krishna's energies and Krishna's himself, right? So that Krishna is going to explain us in this chapter. So jnanam sabhijnanam, right? So jnanam, say this is what jnanam is, knowledge, and vijnana is self-realization. All right. So where we understand more about this thing. So jnana is that we know that, okay, I'm this body, I'm not this body, I'm the soul, there is supreme soul, there is Krishna. And the vijnana, we can be more realized knowledge. Yes, I have some loving relationship with Supreme Lord. That connection establishes over there. And Krishna is going to explain this in this chapter and further as well, that he says, by knowing all this knowledge, nothing further shall remain for you to know. So this is the complete essence of all knowledge, as you can say, right? Because if you'll see it in chapter 9, Krishna says, Rajvidya Rajguhyam. So this knowledge is the king of knowledge, Rajavidya. And Rajguhyam, this knowledge is secret of all secrets as well. Though it's open book, but there are so many hidden gems are there in this book. and that can only be revealed when we closely associate with the devotees of Lord, closely associate with this Bhagavad Gita, closely associate with Srimad Bhagavatam. Then only these things will get revealed slowly and slowly. And hence, Prabhupada says in this purport, very sweet and small purport actually, says complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world. What that is? That spirit behind it, the source of both of them. So how this material world has been created, how is the spiritual world, and what is the source behind both of them. Right, that's a complete knowledge. This is transcendental knowledge. And the Lord wants to explain the above mentioned system of knowledge because Arjuna is Krishna's confidential devotee and friend. Another point comes up here. Then Krishna could have chosen anyone to speak this knowledge, but importantly, he has chosen Arjuna to speak because Arjuna was a devotee and friend. If you remember, in chapter 4 also Krishna says that you are my bhakta, bhakto asmi sakhasheti. You are my devotee as well as my friend. And hence, you will be able to understand this knowledge very easily. Krishna says, Rahasyam eva etat uttamam. So I will give this rahasya, I will give this secret only to you because you are my friend and devotee. So to understand Krishna, to understand Bhagavad Gita, we need to be like Arjuna, to become a devotee of Lord and a friend of Lord as well. Right. So when we become this stage, we can actually able to understand this knowledge very easily. And I think Prabhupada says that in the beginning of 4th chapter, this explanation was given by the Lord, and it is again confirmed here as well. So complete knowledge can be achieved only by the devotee of the Lord in disciplic succession from the Lord. And therefore, one should be intelligent enough to know the source of all knowledge. So we need to use our intelligence to know that from where I am getting this knowledge, right? And who is the cause of all the causes, and the only object of meditation is all types of yoga practices. So when the cause of all causes becomes known, then everything knowable becomes known and nothing remains unknown, right? So that's a poetic line. So who is the cause of all causes? Lord Brahma says, isn't it? Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Sarva Karana Karanam. In that verse, right? Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. So Anadir Adir Govinda. So he's the cause of all causes, right? And who is Govinda? Krishna himself, right? So when we know all these things, nothing remains unknown. So when we understand that actually everything, even in spiritual world and even in the material world, happens because of Krishna, that's the end of all knowledge, right? So it's 45. So we'll stop today here, and then we'll continue on Monday from verse 3, where we will see that how this knowledge is very rare, and what are the people, or the types of people who don't surrender to Krishna, and who surrender to Krishna, and what are the motive behind surrenderance, and all those things will be this knowledge will be given by Krishna to us in this chapter. Anyone have any quick questions or thoughts, or am I too fast today? You can let me know.
I think it was perfect, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thanks for joining a lot of time. I hope you are getting better as well.
Yes, Prabhu, I'm completely fine now. Thank you.
That's nice to hear it. Yes, a difficult time for everyone. Okay, so yes, Mataji, you have any question? All right. So we have thought that and every day in this new year we will actually finishing our session by chanting Narsimha Aarti. So we'll do a quick Narsimha Aarti after. So ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भगवद गीता की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. So I'll say Narsimha Aarti prayers, and